often seems to me here that a person believes that if they tell you their story, that that's who they are. And sometimes these stories are constructed of the most banal, second-hand psychological and spiritual cliche. And you look at a beautiful, interesting face telling a story that you know doesn't hold a candle to the life that's secretly in there.
Hi, you're with Shireen Qudosi. Join me on a journey through the landscape of faith, identity, and belonging as we discuss some of the most provocative issues of the 21st century through intimate storytelling of our most deeply personal narratives. As many of you may know, I've been really interested in personal narratives for quite some time, and I've gone back and forth and shared some of my narrative history as quote-unquote a reformer, and also shared the stories of other people who are like-minded in the way that we think about the world. And what I'm really interested in is bringing you more of those stories in a more official capacity, which I hope this podcast and videocast will do, and also bringing you the perspectives of people who don't necessarily think like you and I, and looking to see if we can come to the table and have a conversation that is meaningful so that we can understand each other a little bit better in a civil capacity, even if we walk away not agreeing. So our very first episode is with Carl Jack, and Carl is a Black American convert to Islam who is a conservative and a former board member of a CARE New York chapter. And Carl talks about his experience and what it was like when he converted to Islam, what he thought it was going to be, and then his experience as it was. So there's a difference between Islam, the philosophy, and then Islam as it is practiced by the people or as it is represented through the people of the faith. And he also talks about his experience in dealing with the community as a businessman and how he really felt during his time in CARE. So for example, you've got CARE who champions civil rights, but he felt that it was really falling short when it came to respecting the African American lineage of the civil rights era and the civil rights movement, everything that those predecessors have done to really lay the heavy bricks for the American Muslim efforts now. And Carl also talks about Muslim advocacy days at the state capitals and what his experience was like there, and the portrait of Black Americans as weak versus the reality. And he has a really striking picture that he paints that I couldn't possibly even replicate. You have to listen to the way that he describes it. And, really how that history relates to where African Americans are today. So I learned a lot from this podcast. I thought I was interviewing someone who was just about CARE, but he really educated me a lot more on the Black American Muslim experience and how we can better ally with those individuals and better respect those stories and create space for that. So I welcome Carl, and I hope you enjoy this video or podcast, however you're listening to it. And if you get a chance, please do share it. Please also give however you can. These things take a really, really long time, and there isn't a piggy bank for it, so to speak. So your donations go a really long way in making sure that I have the time and availability freed up so that I can really dedicate to more of these interviews and reach out to folks and do the work it takes to get to know people before they come on board and sit down and have a chat for everyone to listen to. All right, thank you so much, everyone. And here we go.
You know what? My thing is, I believe I'll answer any question from anyone. I just tell them, don't be upset with the answer you get.
Yeah.
What I have found, my experience with our people, for lack of a better word, is if you're not following a particular agenda, you are the bad guy. Okay. I remember when I first became a Muslim. Well, I'm Carl Jack. I am an organic farmer from Aiken, South Carolina. I live in New York right now. I kind of go back and forth. I also have an MBA. I grew up in a Southern family of farmers. The farm that I have now has been in my family since slavery. And I remember growing up in South Carolina. It was different. I lived in the South, but I also grew up in the North too. My dad was a physicist, and he worked for IBM. And IBM is huge in upstate New York, and that's how I found my way to the New York area. But I always went back and forth, to the South. Grew up in a Southern, my grandparents were Southern Baptists. And I remember going to church as a kid. It was hell for me because I remember going, especially in the summer, you would put on your 3-piece suit, this hot, excuse my language, yeah, hot as hell. Yeah. Okay, 3-piece suit, and you would sit there all day, and I would listen to this pastor just rant. And I always kind of laughed because I was like, this can't be real, I would listen to him basically say, if you're not doing things this way, you're going to hell, okay? But then my dad, who was from Trinidad, he was, his religion, so to speak, he was a Protestant. But I would argue that he was actually an atheist, but his religion was Protestant. I would go to the Protestant church, hear the same thing. If you don't do things this particular way, you're going to hell. I had friends who were Jehovah's Witnesses, same thing. I had friends who were Catholics, same thing. And I always kind of felt like, my chances of getting into heaven aren't good, with, you have 100 different denominations telling you if you're not doing something a particular way, you're going to hell. And I went on this journey of just searching for spirituality. And I had some friends who were Muslim. And I remember they were and it were different groups. One group was from Gambia. Another group was from Egypt. And I remember my friends from Gambia, we would talk about religion, and they said, have you ever read the Quran? And I was like, no, and they were very calm. And they said, they would never argue with me. And I was always up for a debate. But that's me, I'm always up for a debate. And excuse me, they said, just read the Quran. Yeah. And we'll have a discussion. And it took me years before I actually opened it up. And one day I just opened it, and I got to a passage, and it said something like, there are righteous among Christian, Jews, and Muslims. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. That makes sense to me, okay? You're not telling me, because in my head, I never believed that one particular group could have a lock on on getting to heaven. Okay, so when I heard righteous among Christian, Jews, and Muslims, I was like, okay, this is appealing. And I started kind of reading and studying, and I would talk to my friends who were, that were Muslim. Yeah. And I accepted Islam because of the principles I believed in, okay? But I always had a problem with organized religion. My experience with organized religion has not always been good. I've always seen a lot of hypocrisy with religious leaders. So I never trusted religious leaders or, even religious people I had an issue with. To fast forward a little bit, I accepted Islam. I was probably 33 or so. Okay. And I remember my first Ramadan. I didn't know anything about Ramadan. I didn't know anything about, I didn't know anything. It was my very first Ramadan. And I think I accepted Islam maybe a month before Ramadan. And I remember my friends from Egypt, who they were always very, very down to earth.
Like this is
So
what you're gonna get. Like this is the real thing.
and this is the real thing.
Yeah.
And I just assumed, okay, at that point, I was like, okay, almost, this is it. I have found, I'm in heaven. This is it.
Thing.
Oh, poor thing. Let me tell you, I went to, I think it was the first day of Ramadan, the first prayer that evening. I went and I was like, what the hell? Who are all these people? Because for the month that I was going, I would go to every prayer and it's the same 6 people. Okay? Now all of a sudden, there's 70,000 people. Okay? And I immediately ran into what I call the Muslim police. Okay? I call them the Ramadan police. That directing you here. So everyone, we go in and it's time to pray. I don't speak Arabic, not one bit. Okay, I pray in Arabic, not like I know a little bit, but at that time I didn't know anything. And they're just going on and on and on. And I was like, okay, and I'm just following. I don't know what they're saying. I don't know anything. So I'm just following what everyone else is doing. And I got tired. And I said, I'm going home. And I just got up and I decided to walk out. I didn't know that it's not proper to break a prayer line. So I walked in between these people and these guys pushed me out of the way. And I was like, oh, wow, okay. My first thought was to fight, you know? Yeah. I said, okay, this is different, okay? And I remember I was angry and I left. The next day I came back and I kind of came back with a different attitude. The blinders were off. So I was very, I was looking at people for who they were at that point, okay? I noticed that as there weren't that many Black Muslims at this particular mosque.
Which mosque were you at?
It was a mosque in Wappingers Falls, New York. I can't remember the exact name.
Like an Arab community or?
Well, it was a mixture. It was mostly Arab people from Bangladesh and Pakistan.
Okay.
But you have to remember the area that I live in New York is it's an upper middle class neighborhood. I would say that 95% of the people that went to this mosque were professionals, whether it be doctor, engineer, lawyer, okay? And they were, I immediately noticed that a lot of things wasn't so much about religion as it was about class and where you came from, okay?
And ethnicity.
What's that?
Ethnicity as well.
Oh, absolutely. I felt as though I was accepted only because they had to. Okay?
How many Black people were at that mosque typically?
I would say out of the 400 families that were a part of this mosque, I would say maybe 20 families were Black, okay? But I always felt different, okay? I never really felt a part of it, okay? I felt like, okay, yeah, I'm allowed to come. I'm allowed to pray. I'm allowed to do these things, but I was never what I would consider a real Muslim to them.